The day I discovered my husband had stolen every dollar I had saved over 30 years, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen at 5:42 in the morning, holding a mug of coffee that had already gone cold. It wasn't the missing money that shattered me first. It was the house. Specifically, the photograph of the house glowing on his phone screen. A pale yellow colonial with white shutters and a wraparound porch. The kind of place I used to circle in real estate magazines, back when I still believed dreams came true if you worked hard enough. Except this one wasn't for me. It wasn't even for us. It was for his daughter, and I wasn't supposed to find out. My name is Patricia Sloan. I am 58 years old. I spent most of my life working as a night shift nurse at Maple Ridge Rehabilitation Center in western Pennsylvania. 30 years of lifting bodies heavier than my own, of listening to strangers cry in the dark, of missing holidays and family dinners because someone always needed me more. Every paycheck, I saved a little. Sometimes only $20, sometimes $50. Once, after a Christmas bonus, I saved $2,000 in one deposit and cried in the bank parking lot because it felt like proof that one day I would finally be safe. That account was never meant to make me rich. It was meant to make me secure. A small retirement cottage by a lake. A quiet place where no one needed anything from me anymore. That was the plan. Until my husband, Raymond Keller, decided my life savings were his to spend. I met Raymond when I was 52. He was charming in that gentle, steady way older men can be. He worked as a logistics manager at a regional shipping company. He laughed easily. He listened when I spoke. He called me strong. He also had a daughter from his first marriage, Vanessa. She was 33 now. Beautiful, sharp-tongued, always dressed like she was about to attend a wedding, even if she was only going grocery shopping. From the beginning, I knew she didn't like me. She smiled at me the way people smile at something stuck to their shoe. But Raymond always said, "Give her time. She's protective. She just wants to make sure I'm not replacing her mother." I believed him. I believed so many things. The morning I saw the house on his phone, Raymond was still asleep in the bedroom. He had left his phone on the kitchen counter while showering. It buzzed once. I wasn't snooping. I was reaching to move it aside when the screen lit up. A text from Vanessa. It read, "Dad, closing confirmed. The lawyer said everything is transferred. I can't believe it's finally mine." Attached was the photo. My stomach tightened before my mind even caught up. Transferred. Mine. I opened the banking app on my own phone. I still remember how my hands shook so badly, I entered my password wrong twice. When the screen finally loaded, the number stared back at me like an accusation. Balance, $0. Every cent was gone. 30 years. Gone. At first, I thought it had to be fraud, some mistake, a hacker, a banking error. But then I noticed the transaction history. One single transfer. Authorized. 3 days earlier. Signed electronically by me. Except I had never signed anything. That was when I realized Raymond had access to my account. Because I had trusted him enough to add his name after we married. Because he said it would make things easier if something ever happened to me. Because I believed marriage meant safety. I didn't confront him immediately. I stood there in the quiet kitchen, feeling something inside me collapse and harden at the same time. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something colder, a realization. I wasn't his partner. I was his funding source. When Raymond walked into the kitchen 10 minutes later, hair still damp from the shower, he kissed my cheek like he always did. "Morning, Pat," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, at the ease in his posture, at the complete absence of guilt in his eyes. And I asked the question that would change everything. "Did you buy Vanessa a house with my money?" He froze, just for half a second. But it was enough. His silence told me more than any confession ever could. Then he said the words that ignited the first spark of revenge inside my chest. "You weren't using it anyway." And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He truly believed he had done nothing wrong. But what he didn't know was that he had just started a war he could never win. Raymond didn't apologize. That was the part that hurt more than the theft itself. He didn't even look ashamed. He simply sighed, like I was being unreasonable, and poured himself coffee while explaining, in a calm, practical tone, why what he had done was perfectly justified. "Vanessa needed stability," he said, leaning against the counter. "She's had a hard life, Patricia. Divorced, raising a child alone. She deserved something secure." My throat burned. And I didn't? I asked quietly. He shrugged. You already have security. We have this house. This house. The one I paid half the mortgage on. The one that was legally in his name, because his credit score had been better when we refinanced. The one that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. I remember gripping the edge of the counter so tightly, my fingers went numb. That was my retirement savings, I said. You weren't retiring anytime soon, he replied. You always say you like working. Like. As if exhaustion was a hobby. As if decades of night shifts and aching joints were a personal preference. Then he delivered the sentence that carved something permanent inside me. You're being selfish, Pat. This is family. You should want to help. Family. The word tasted bitter, because in that moment, I understood something I had refused to see for years. I was not family. I was the outsider, funding their future. The realization didn't explode. It settled. Heavy, cold, like ice spreading through water. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply nodded and said, I need to get ready for work, and I left. At the hospital that night, I moved through my shift like a ghost. The beeping monitors, the smell of antiseptic, the low murmur of televisions in patient rooms, all felt distant, muffled. But inside my mind, something sharp was forming, a plan, not yet fully shaped, but alive. Around 3 a.m, while helping one of my long-term patients adjust her blankets, she patted my hand and said softly, You look like someone who just lost something important. I almost laughed. Lost. That was too gentle a word. I had been stripped. But then she added, Just remember, sometimes losing something shows you who people really are. And once you see that, you can never unsee it. Those words stayed with me all night, because she was right. I saw Raymond clearly now, and what I saw was not a husband. It was a man who believed my loyalty made me weak. He had no idea it was about to become my greatest weapon. The first step of my revenge came unexpectedly 2 weeks later, during Sunday dinner at his sister's house. Vanessa was there. She arrived late, wearing a cream-colored coat and the smile of someone who had just won a private lottery. She hugged Raymond first. Then she turned to me. Thank you, she said sweetly. Dad told me you supported the decision. It means so much. Supported. The lie slid smoothly from her lips, and Raymond didn't correct her. He just sat there, nodding, watching me, waiting to see if I would stay quiet. That was when I realized something else. They weren't just taking from me. They were rewriting reality, painting me as the generous stepmother, the willing donor. The fool. I smiled back at her, warmly. And I said the words that marked the true beginning of their downfall. Of course, Vanessa. Family always gets what they deserve in the end. She laughed, thinking it was kindness. Raymond relaxed in his chair. Neither of them noticed the way my hands had stopped trembling, because in that moment, my fear was gone. In its place was something far more dangerous. Clarity. And as I watched them celebrate with wine and laughter, I silently made a promise to myself. They had taken my future, so I would take something far more valuable from them, something they didn't even realize they were about to lose. And the opportunity to do it was already closer than either of them could imagine. The opportunity revealed itself on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, exactly 21 days after I learned my savings were gone. It came in the form of a thin white envelope resting in our mailbox. At first, I almost overlooked it. It was mixed between grocery coupons and a catalog for orthopedic shoes, the kind of mail that usually went straight into the recycling bin. But then I saw the return address, Harrison and Blake Legal Group. My stomach tightened. I knew that name. It was the same law firm Raymond had mentioned years ago when his mother died, the same firm that handled his family's inheritance matters. I stood in the driveway holding that envelope, feeling the winter air sting my cheeks, as a strange instinct told me this piece of paper mattered more than anything I had touched in weeks. I opened it right there. Inside was a formal notice. It was addressed to Raymond Keller and Patricia Sloan Keller. My name. Jointly listed. That alone made my pulse quicken. The letter explained that Raymond's late aunt, Eleanor Whitcomb, had passed away 3 months earlier in Delaware. Her estate was finally being processed, and both Raymond and I were named beneficiaries in her will. I read that sentence 3 times. Beneficiaries. Plural. Not just him. Me too. My hands trembled slightly as I continued reading. The estate included a historic property valued at approximately $700,000, along with a trust fund reserved for maintenance and preservation of the property. The letter requested we attend a formal reading of the will in 2 weeks. I stood frozen, because suddenly, everything shifted. Raymond hadn't told me about this. Not a single word, which meant one of 2 things. Either he didn't know, or he knew and intended to keep it from me. Both possibilities ignited the same realization inside my chest. He had no idea that I now held leverage. And leverage was power. That evening, I said nothing when he came home. I cooked dinner like usual. I asked about his day. I listened to his complaints about work. I watched him closely, looking for any hint he knew about the inheritance. But he never mentioned it, not once. Instead, he spent most of dinner talking about Vanessa's new house. They're planning to host Thanksgiving there, he said casually. It'll be good for her to establish traditions. I felt something twist inside me. Traditions, with money stolen from my future. But I kept my expression calm. That sounds nice, I replied. Later that night, after he fell asleep, I sat in the living room with the letter in my lap. I read it again, slowly. One phrase stood out. The property was not to be sold without agreement from all listed beneficiaries. All. Not just Raymond. Me. For the first time since my savings disappeared, I felt something close to control return, because this wasn't just an inheritance. It was a chain, and Raymond had no idea he was already caught in it. The next mini-shock came 3 days later. I called the law firm during my lunch break. The receptionist transferred me to a woman named Laura Mendel, one of the estate attorneys. Her voice was calm, precise. Mrs. Keller, I'm glad you called, she said. We've been trying to reach your husband as well. He hasn't mentioned it, I replied carefully. There was a pause. Then she said something that made my heart pound. That's surprising, given the circumstances. What circumstances? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said quietly, perhaps it's best discussed at the official reading. But I can tell you this much. Her voice lowered slightly. Your name was added to the will only 6 months before Ms. Whitcomb passed. I sat upright. Added. Why? I asked. Laura hesitated. Then she said the words that changed everything. Because she specifically requested you be protected from financial exploitation by family members. The world seemed to tilt. Protected from exploitation. She had seen it. Somehow, Raymond's own aunt had seen exactly what kind of man he was. I felt a slow, burning heat rise in my chest. Not rage. Not yet. Something sharper. Validation. And for the first time since the betrayal, I realized something extraordinary. I was not as alone as Raymond believed, because someone powerful had already prepared a safeguard, and Raymond was about to walk straight into it. The will reading took place on a gray Thursday morning in a polished conference room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. Raymond thought it was routine. That was obvious from the way he walked in, relaxed, even slightly smug, as if he already expected to walk out wealthier. He wore his best navy blazer, the one he usually saved for weddings and company parties. Vanessa was there too. She sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, her manicured nails tapping against the screen with quiet impatience. Neither of them looked concerned. Neither of them looked at me, and that told me everything. They believed this moment belonged to them. The lawyer, Laura Mendel, entered with a thick folder and a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. We all took our seats. The room felt too quiet. Then she began reading. Most of the will was straightforward. Donations to charities, small amounts to distant relatives. Instructions about preserving Eleanor Whitcomb's historic home. Raymond barely listened. He leaned back, arms crossed, already confident, until Laura reached the final section. She paused before reading it, and I saw something change in her expression. Ms. Whitcomb has included a personal statement, she said. Raymond frowned slightly. Is that necessary? He asked. Laura met his eyes calmly. Yes, she insisted. Then she read. In my final years, I observed patterns of financial manipulation within my extended family. I witnessed individuals who treated generosity not as a gift, but as an entitlement. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Raymond's jaw tightened. Laura continued, "For this reason, I have added Patricia Sloan Keller as co-beneficiary. She has shown integrity, independence, and kindness without expectation of return." My throat tightened unexpectedly. I had met Eleanor only twice. Yet she had seen me clearly, more clearly than my own husband. Laura's voice remained steady. "The Whitcomb property shall not be sold, transferred, or mortgaged without Patricia Sloan Keller's explicit consent. Additionally, if any attempt is made to pressure or coerce her regarding the estate, her ownership share will automatically increase to full control." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Raymond stared at the table. Vanessa's face had gone pale. But Laura wasn't finished. She further directs that any beneficiary proven to have engaged in financial exploitation of Patricia Sloan Keller shall forfeit all inheritance rights. That sentence landed like thunder. Raymond's head snapped up. "What does that even mean?" he demanded. Laura met his gaze without flinching. "It means exactly what it says, Mr. Keller." The room felt suddenly too small, too tight. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. He turned to me slowly. "Patricia," he said, voice low, strained. "We need to talk about this." I looked at him calmly, really calmly, because in that moment, something inside me finally settled into place. He had stolen my past, but his future was now completely in my hands. And as I met his gaze, I realized something else. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice. And he had no idea how much evidence I already had. Evidence that could destroy everything he thought he was about to inherit, including something he believed was still safely hidden from me. Something far worse than the stolen money. And I was about to uncover it. Raymond tried to talk to me before we even left the lawyer's parking lot. He caught up to me beside my car, his voice low and urgent, the confident tone he usually carried completely gone. "Patricia, wait. We need to handle this carefully." Carefully. The word almost made me laugh. I turned slowly to face him. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to truly study his expression. The faint sheen of sweat along his hairline, the tightness around his mouth, the calculation flickering behind his eyes. Not guilt, never guilt, only fear of losing something. "I don't see anything complicated," I said calmly. "The will seems very clear." His jaw flexed. "You don't understand how these things work," he said. "Family estates, they require cooperation." Cooperation. That word again. It sounded so polite, so reasonable. But now I heard what it really meant. Submission. I folded my arms slowly, like the way you cooperated when you transferred my retirement savings without asking. His eyes flashed. "That's not the same," he snapped. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Because that was for Vanessa," he said, as if it were obvious. "She needed help." And there it was again, the same justification, the same unwavering belief that his daughter's needs outweighed my rights. Something inside me hardened further. "I see," I said. "So you're saying her needs justified taking from me?" He opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment, he seemed to realize he was standing on dangerous ground. So he changed tactics. His voice softened. "Patricia, you know I care about you. But this inheritance? It's part of my family legacy. Vanessa is the one who will carry it forward." There it was, the truth, finally spoken aloud. I was never meant to be part of that future. I was only ever meant to support it. I nodded slowly. "You're right," I said. His shoulders relaxed slightly. He thought I was conceding. Then I added, very calmly, "Your family legacy seems built on taking from women who trust you." His face went completely still, and for the first time, I saw something crack. Not just fear, but something deeper. Because in that moment, he realized I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. That night, I did something I had never done in my marriage. I locked the bedroom door. I slept in the guest room. And for the first time in weeks, I slept deeply because I finally understood something important. I was no longer reacting. I was planning. The next piece of the puzzle came 3 days later at work. I was on break in the staff lounge when I overheard 2 younger nurses talking about a legal case. "She recorded everything," one of them said. "Texts, bank transfers, conversations. That's how she proved financial exploitation. Recorded. The word echoed inside my mind like a bell. Because suddenly, I remembered something. Years ago, after Raymond first gained access to my bank account, I had activated automatic email confirmations for all transactions. I had forgotten about it. Until now, my heart began to pound, because that meant there was a record, not just of the transfer, but of the authorization trail. I went home that evening and logged into my old email account. It took almost 20 minutes to find the archived messages, but when I did, my breath caught. There it was, a detailed transaction alert, time-stamped, location tagged, authorized from a device that was not mine. And attached to the record was a digital signature verification report. One line stood out. Authorization IP, linked to Keller Logistics Company network, Raymond's workplace. My hands trembled slightly as realization hit. He hadn't just taken the money. He had forged authorization. That wasn't just betrayal. That was fraud. Real, prosecutable fraud. And suddenly, Eleanor Whitcomb's clause in the will made perfect sense. She had anticipated this. She had prepared for this. And now, I held the proof. But what I didn't yet know was that this wasn't the worst secret Raymond was hiding. Not even close. Because the next discovery would reveal something far more devastating than stolen money. Something that explained why Eleanor had truly tried to protect me. And it would shatter everything I thought I understood about my marriage. The second secret revealed itself during Thanksgiving dinner at Vanessa's new house. The house my money had paid for. Walking through that front door felt surreal. The hardwood floors gleamed under warm lighting. The scent of roasted turkey filled the air. A large family photo hung above the fireplace. Raymond and Vanessa stood in the center, smiling. Proud, as if they had built this life together through honest means. Vanessa greeted me with exaggerated warmth. "Patricia, I'm so glad you came," she said brightly. "This house wouldn't exist without you." Her tone sounded sweet, but there was something sharp underneath, a quiet mockery. Raymond avoided my eyes. Dinner itself was tense but polite. Conversations about weather, work, holiday plans, until dessert. That was when Vanessa's son Caleb wandered into the room, holding a tablet. He couldn't have been more than 10. He looked at Raymond and asked innocently, "Grandpa, when are you moving in with us for good?" The room went silent. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. Raymond forced a laugh. "Buddy, what are you talking about?" Caleb frowned. "You said once Grandma Patricia was only temporary, that you'd live here after her house sells." Temporary. The word hit me like ice water. Vanessa's face went pale. "Caleb, go play upstairs," she snapped. But it was too late. The truth had already slipped out. I turned slowly toward Raymond. My voice was very calm. "Temporary?" He looked cornered, angry, embarrassed. "That's not what he meant," Vanessa said quickly. But Raymond didn't deny it. He just looked away. And in that moment, everything became clear. The stolen savings, the secret inheritance, the future plans that didn't include me. I wasn't just being exploited. I was being phased out, gradually, strategically, like a resource that had reached the end of its usefulness. Something inside my chest didn't break. It crystallized. Because now, for the first time, I saw the full shape of their intentions, and it gave me absolute clarity about what I needed to do next. I smiled. Calmly, slowly. "Don't worry," I said, my voice steady. "Everyone gets exactly what they deserve in the end." Raymond finally met my eyes, and what he saw there made him visibly flinch. Because he recognized something new, something he had never seen in me before. Not sadness, not hurt, but resolve. And what he didn't know yet was that I had already contacted a lawyer of my own. And that lawyer had just uncovered a piece of information so explosive, it had the power to not only destroy Raymond's inheritance, but to cost him his job, his reputation, and possibly his freedom. The real revenge had just begun. The first time I sat across from my own lawyer, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Steady. Her name was Denise Harper. She was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, and completely unbothered by male entitlement. Her office overlooked the Monongahela River, gray water sliding past steel bridges, like time refusing to stop for anyone. I handed her everything. The bank statements, the email confirmations, the IP authorization trail, linked to Raymond's company network. I expected outrage. Instead, Denise grew very quiet. She read every page slowly. Then she looked up at me and said, "Patricia, this isn't just marital conflict. This is documented financial fraud." Hearing someone say it out loud made my spine straighten. Fraud, not misunderstanding. Not family disagreement. Fraud. "And it gets worse," she added. My stomach tightened. Denise slid one of the pages toward me. "Your husband didn't just access the account. He used a company network to do it. That means he conducted personal financial transactions using corporate infrastructure. If his employer audits internal network activity," she didn't need to finish, "his job could evaporate. His pension, gone." And that was before even touching the inheritance clause. I felt something dark flicker inside me. Not cruelty. Justice. "You mentioned the will clause," Denise continued. "If we formally document this and notify the estate attorney, he could forfeit his inheritance entirely. The Whitcomb mansion, $700,000. Maintenance trust. All of it. Vanessa's future legacy. Gone." For the first time since this began, I felt something close to power. But Denise wasn't done. "There's something else," she said carefully. She opened another folder. "This came up during a preliminary search. Raymond refinanced your marital home 8 months ago." My heart skipped. "What?" "He took out a home equity line of credit." The room felt suddenly smaller. "How much?" Denise met my eyes. $180,000. The air left my lungs. "That money isn't in your joint accounts," she added, which meant only one thing. He hadn't just taken my retirement savings. He had leveraged our home. Quietly, strategically, without telling me. The realization burned hotter than anything before. He wasn't planning for Vanessa's stability. He was building an exit strategy, and I was the collateral. I drove home in silence, the winter sky low and heavy above the highway. Every memory from the past year rearranged itself in my mind. The late-night phone calls he took outside, the sudden interest in financial paperwork, the way he insisted I didn't need to worry about big-picture decisions. He had been preparing to leave, to move into that yellow colonial with white shutters, to replace me. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated me. When I walked into our house that evening, he was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing something on his laptop. He looked up. Tension flickered across his face. "Where were you?" he asked. "With my lawyer," I said calmly. His face drained of color. "You what?" I set my purse down, slowly. "I've documented the unauthorized transfer of my retirement funds. The IP authorization trail links directly to your workplace network." He stood up. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" I asked quietly. "And I'm aware of the home equity line of credit." His mouth opened, closed. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely shaken. "You had no right." "No," I interrupted softly. "You had no right." Silence thickened between us. Then he said something that told me exactly who he truly was. "You wouldn't destroy everything over this." Over this. As if theft, manipulation, and planning my replacement were minor inconveniences. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "Watch me." And that was the moment he realized something irreversible. I was no longer the woman who endured. I was the woman who would dismantle. But he still didn't know about the final piece Denise had uncovered, the one that tied everything together, the one that would not just threaten his inheritance, but expose a hidden truth that would humiliate him publicly. And that truth was about to surface. 2 weeks later, Raymond's company announced an internal audit. The timing was almost poetic. Keller Logistics had recently merged with a larger regional firm, and part of the transition required reviewing digital security compliance. Raymond mentioned it casually over breakfast. "They're being ridiculous about it," he muttered, digging into years of network logs. I stirred my coffee slowly. Years of network logs. Exactly what Denise predicted. He had no idea how vulnerable he was. But the real explosion came 3 days later. I was finishing a shift at the hospital when my phone rang. "Denise." Her voice was measured but firm. "They've discovered unauthorized financial transactions conducted through company systems." My heart pounded. They traced it to Raymond's credentials. Silence stretched between us. "And?" I asked quietly. "He's being placed on administrative leave pending investigation." Administrative leave, which meant suspension. Which meant scrutiny, which meant everything he built was now teetering. I didn't feel joy. I felt inevitability, karma moving slowly, but precisely. When I arrived home that evening, Raymond was already there, sitting in the dark. The only light came from the television screen, flickering silently across his face. "They suspended me," he said without looking up. I set my coat down. "I know." He finally looked at me. Anger, panic, desperation. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "You did." He stood abruptly. "They'll ruin my reputation." I met his gaze steadily. "You ruined it the moment you decided I was disposable." He ran his hands through his hair. "This will destroy Vanessa's stability. Her house. Her house was built on stolen money," I said sharply. "Mine." The word hung heavy in the air. Mine. For the first time, he didn't argue, because he knew. And then he said something that revealed the final, hidden truth. "I was going to tell you," he muttered. "About what?" He hesitated. Then he whispered, "I filed for separation 3 weeks ago." The room tilted. "Filed? Without telling me?" "I was waiting until after Christmas," he continued. "It would have been easier." Easier. For him, not for me. Everything snapped into clarity. The stolen savings, the equity loan, the inheritance maneuvering, the phased exit. He wasn't just replacing me, he was erasing me. But he miscalculated, because the separation filing triggered something critical. Automatic financial disclosure requirements, which meant full investigation, which meant exposure. I felt something unexpected rise inside me. Relief. Because now, everything would surface legally, transparently, publicly. I stepped closer to him. "You should have told me," I said quietly. He looked broken now, not because he regretted hurting me, but because his strategy had collapsed. "You wouldn't have understood," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "You're right," I said. "I didn't understand before." I paused, "But I do now." And as I walked past him toward the guest room, I knew something with absolute certainty. The separation he tried to control was about to become the most expensive mistake of his life. Because next week, Denise would file a formal notice with the Whitcomb estate attorney. And once that happened, Raymond wouldn't just lose me. He would lose everything he thought he had secured, including the house he bought for Vanessa. And what none of them realized yet was that the bank was about to come knocking. The bank letter arrived on a cold Monday morning, tucked between a grocery flyer and a holiday charity appeal. At first, it looked ordinary, just another envelope with corporate lettering and fine print warnings. But when I opened it, my hands grew very still. It was a formal notice regarding the home equity line of credit Raymond had taken out. The payments were already past due, 3 months overdue. I read the letter twice, to be certain. 3 months, which meant something chilling. Raymond hadn't just borrowed against our home. He had stopped paying almost immediately. The letter stated clearly that if the delinquency continued, the lender would initiate foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. The word felt heavy and final. Our house, the one place I had believed was still stable, was now at risk. I sat at the kitchen table holding that letter, feeling something shift deep inside me. Not panic. Clarity. Because now, the full picture was undeniable. Raymond hadn't been building a future. He had been gambling with ours, and he had lost. When he came home later that evening, I placed the letter in front of him without speaking. He read it silently. His face tightened. "I was going to catch up," he muttered. "With what money?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer, because he couldn't. His suspension meant no paycheck. His pension was frozen, pending investigation, and his inheritance hung by a thread. "You used my savings," I continued calmly. "You borrowed against our home. You stopped paying the loan, and you filed for separation." I met his eyes. "Do you understand what that looks like legally?" He swallowed hard. He did understand. It looked like deliberate financial exploitation, the exact phrase Eleanor Whitcomb had written into her will. He slumped into the chair. For the first time, he looked truly defeated. "This isn't how it was supposed to happen," he whispered. I felt no sympathy, only a quiet, steady distance. "How is it supposed to happen?" I asked. He stared at the table. I thought I could stabilize Vanessa first, then settle things with you fairly." Fairly. The word sounded absurd. "You stole everything I built," I said softly. There was never anything fair about that. Silence stretched between us. Then he did something unexpected. He reached across the table. "Please," he said, "don't report the fraud. We can fix this. We can work something out." The plea in his voice might have moved me once, months ago, years ago. But now, all I saw was self-preservation, not remorse, just fear of consequences. I gently moved my hand away. "It's already reported," I said quietly. His face went completely pale. "What?" "The estate attorney has been notified," I continued. "And so has my lawyer." His breathing grew uneven. "You're going to ruin my life." I held his gaze steadily. "No," I said. "You ruined it when you decided I didn't matter." That night, he slept on the couch. Not because I asked him to, because he knew he had no right to share my space anymore. 3 days later, the estate attorney sent an official letter. It stated that due to documented evidence of financial exploitation, Raymond Keller's inheritance rights were suspended pending review. Suspended. One word, but it carried enormous weight. Vanessa called him that evening. I heard her shouting through the phone from across the living room. "You promised that house would secure our future." Her voice cracked with anger. "What are we supposed to do if you lose everything?" Raymond had no answer, because for the first time in his life, there was nothing left to manipulate. The final confrontation happened during a snowy evening in early December. Raymond asked me to meet him in the living room. He looked older, smaller, as if the past weeks had drained something fundamental from him. "I received the official notice," he said quietly. "They're moving forward with the inheritance forfeiture hearing." I nodded. "I know." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said something that revealed the last piece of truth. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. I studied his face, and for the first time, I saw something genuine. Not regret for what he did, regret for being caught. "You didn't think it would hurt me," I said calmly. That was the difference. He had never considered my pain as real, only as an inconvenience. His voice trembled slightly. "I thought you were strong enough to recover." The words landed heavily. Strong enough, as if strength meant tolerating betrayal. I took a slow breath. "I was strong enough," I said. "Just not in the way you expected." Silence filled the room. Then he asked the question he had been avoiding. "What happens now?" I met his eyes steadily. Now the truth finishes its work. The separation filing would proceed. The fraud investigation would continue. The inheritance hearing would determine his forfeiture. And the foreclosure process on the house he secretly leveraged would move forward. Everything he built on manipulation was collapsing at once, like a structure with no foundation. He leaned back in his chair, completely defeated now. "I really did love you," he said quietly. I believed he thought that was true, in his own way. But love without respect is just possession. "I loved you too," I replied softly, past tense. He closed his eyes briefly, and in that moment, I felt something unexpected. Not anger, not satisfaction, release. Because the war inside me was over. The outcome was already decided. All that remained was time. As I stood and walked toward the guest room, I paused at the doorway. "You once told me I wasn't using my savings anyway," I said quietly. He didn't respond. "So here's what I learned," I continued. "I wasn't saving money." I looked back at him one last time. I was saving myself. And now there was nothing left for him to take. But what Raymond still didn't know was that the next court hearing would reveal a final twist. One that would not only confirm his forfeiture, but expose a hidden clause Eleanor Whitcomb had placed in the will. A clause that would change my life forever. The forfeiture hearing took place 4 days before Christmas. Snow covered the courthouse steps in a thin, glittering layer that crunched underfoot as I climbed them, my breath forming small clouds in the cold air. I remember thinking how quiet everything felt. Not peaceful. Just still. Like the moment before a storm finally ends. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. Raymond sat at the defense table beside his attorney, shoulders slumped, eyes fixed on the surface in front of him. Vanessa sat behind him, her posture rigid, her expression tight with anger that had nowhere left to go. She didn't look at me, not once. Denise sat calmly beside me, her hands folded neatly over a thick folder containing every document we had gathered over the past months. Every bank record, every authorization trail, every legal notice. Evidence doesn't shout, it simply exists. And that made it far more powerful than any argument Raymond could offer. When the judge entered, the room settled into silence. The estate attorney presented the case clearly. Documented financial exploitation, unauthorized fund transfer, intentional concealment of debt, violation of fiduciary trust within marriage. Each fact landed steadily. Undeniably, Raymond's lawyer tried to argue that it was a family financial disagreement, but the judge cut that argument short. This court does not recognize exploitation disguised as marital cooperation, he said firmly. Raymond's shoulders dropped further. And then came the final moment. The estate attorney read Eleanor Whitcomb's final clause. In the event that any beneficiary forfeits their rights due to exploitation of Patricia Sloan Keller, their share shall transfer entirely to Patricia Sloan Keller, with the condition that she may choose to retain or donate the Whitcomb property at her sole discretion. Sole discretion. The words echoed in the silent courtroom. I felt the weight of them settle over me, not like a burden, like freedom. The judge reviewed the documentation for several minutes. Then he spoke. Based on clear evidence, the court confirms that Raymond Keller engaged in financial exploitation. His inheritance rights are hereby permanently revoked. Permanently. The word landed like a final door closing. Vanessa gasped softly. Raymond didn't move. He just stared at the table. The judge continued. Ownership of the Whitcomb estate is transferred in full to Patricia Sloan Keller. In that moment, something inside me finally released. Not triumph, not revenge. Just a deep, quiet sense of completion. Because this was never truly about property. It was about dignity, recognition, justice. When the hearing ended, Raymond approached me outside the courtroom. He looked hollow now, as if everything that once defined him had been stripped away. I never thought it would end like this, he said quietly. I met his gaze. Neither did I. He hesitated, then asked the question he had feared most. Do you hate me? I considered it, honestly. No, I said. Why not? Because hatred ties you to the past, and I was finally free. I don't feel anything for you anymore, I replied gently. That, more than anger, broke him completely, because indifference is the true end of love. I visited the Whitcomb property for the first time in early spring. The snow had melted, leaving the ground soft with new green growth. The historic mansion stood quietly on a small rise, surrounded by old oak trees that had clearly witnessed generations come and go. It wasn't grand in a flashy way. It felt steady, enduring, like it had survived storms before and would survive many more. I walked slowly across the front porch, running my hand along the smooth wooden railing warmed by the sun. For the first time in years, I felt something simple and pure, peace. Not because I had won, but because I had reclaimed myself. I decided not to sell the property. Instead, I established a nonprofit foundation in Eleanor Whitcomb's name. It would provide financial literacy support and legal assistance for older women facing financial exploitation. Women like me. Women who had trusted. Women who had been used. Women who deserved protection. The day we officially opened the foundation office, I stood inside the renovated study of the mansion, sunlight streaming through tall windows, illuminating shelves filled with resource guides and legal information. I thought about the version of myself from 1 year earlier, tired, trusting, believing that love meant sacrifice, without boundaries. She wasn't weak. She was simply unprotected. And now, she was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, not hardened, not bitter, just clear. I learned that revenge isn't always about destroying someone else. Sometimes it's about refusing to let them destroy you. Raymond lost his job, his reputation, his inheritance. Vanessa eventually sold the house he bought her because she couldn't afford the mortgage without his support. I didn't follow what happened after that because their story was no longer mine. My story was about rebuilding, about choosing myself for the first time. And if you've ever felt betrayed, if you've ever been made to feel small, disposable, or excluded, I want you to remember this. You are never powerless when you know the truth. And justice, real justice, may take time, but it always finds its way. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel, because every story we share reminds someone out there that they are not alone. And sometimes, hearing that truth is the first step toward reclaiming your own life.